But if not, I'll make.
I
Okay.
can and I did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was about to say from my experience, like the host would have to give permission, but yeah, you're good. That's great.
All right. So do we want to go ahead and start letting people in? Are we good? Everybody's set?
Let's do it. Okay.
All right.
I got it.
Good afternoon / evening, everyone. We're so glad that you're with us. We will get started in just a couple of moments as people are still clicking the link and getting added to the space, but we are so excited for you to join us and looking forward to a great conversation. Sorry, I forgot. So it is 5:33 p.m. and we want to be respectful of time and definitely allow as much room for tonight's conversation as possible. So again, welcome. We are so glad to have you. My name is Stacy Smallwood. My pronouns are he, him, and I am an associate professor in community health. And I am also a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Faculty Fellows. And it is our pleasure to host this neurodiversity and the classroom panel with all of you this evening. Before we get started, I would like to go around and acknowledge the members of DIFF, the Diversity and Inclusion Faculty Fellows, who have been working to make sure that we were able to provide this learning opportunity for members of our university family. So I'm going to just go around as I see them on my screen. So I want to acknowledge our DIFF members, Clara Walsh, Peggy Shannon Baker, Shanaz Langi, Juan Peng, who is off camera. Thank all of you for your hard work to make this and so many of our other learning opportunities happen. DIFF is an organization that is committed to providing opportunities for learning around areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion as they pertain to the work that we do at Georgia Southern University, as well as provide resources for additional learning. So in order for us to truly work toward and achieve strategic pillar 3 of our strategic plan, which is a commitment to inclusive excellence. And so we are very excited to share this learning opportunity, which largely came from feedback from faculty. In our conversations with new faculty orientation and in talking with many of our colleagues, faculty and staff across our campuses, many people expressed an interest in wanting to learn more about neurodiversity. And so because of that robust interest that came from our colleagues, we wanted to reach out to help facilitate that. And so I'm so thankful that we were connected with the Students with Disabilities Advocacy Group, or SDAG, who you will hear from in just a few moments, a dynamic group of students who are ready to share and offer their experiences. And we're excited to learn from them this evening. So we'll get to introductions in just a moment, but before I do that, just a reminder that we encourage you to use the chat. If you have any questions or comments as we are going along, we will have time for Q&A towards the end of the session. So stay tuned. We'll let you know when we're about to transition into that part. You will have the ability to either type your questions in the chat, or you can share them by coming off of mute when we get to that point. but we really want to have robust interaction. That is where the learning takes place. Bell Hooks talked about the fact that conversation is the revolutionary form of learning, and we are truly looking forward to a revolutionary experience on this evening. So at this time, I would like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask that Jill would introduce herself first.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill King. I am the current secretary and incoming president of the Students with Disabilities Advocacy Group. I'm a neurodivergent person myself, and I'm excited to help educate everybody. Oh, my pronouns are she, her. There you go.
Thank you, Jill. Next, we will introduce Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm excited to be the advocacy chair for SDAG in the fall. So it'll be really exciting. And I'm also part of the neurodivergent community. So I'm really excited to have this turn out for people who are just wanting to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. Next, we will have Madeline.
Hey guys, my name is Madeline. I'm a current graduate student. I'm about to graduate in May, but I'm the current president of SDAG and one of our founders. I am also the social media manager for the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. I am a woman with a disability myself. However, I am actually blind, so I'm visually impaired, not neurodivergent, but I do have a degree from Georgia Southern in psychology, and so I'm here to be a bridge builder between everybody, our panelists and our higher education individuals. So I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Madeline. And last but by no means least, Dr. Karen Fisher.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is such an important topic, and I'm really thankful for DIFF for putting this together and offering it. So I am Karen Fisher. I'm an associate professor of special education in the College of Ed. I also am the lucky advisor of SDAG, and I have learned so much from this incredible group of people. I forgot to say my pronouns are she, her. And I also wanted to share, as we go into the panel presentation, some definitions for you of what neurodiversity means. And so I believe everyone on the call, you should know, like a student with disability that you would have in your course, you'll receive a letter from SARC saying what accommodations and what you're supposed to do to accommodate that student. Well, neurodiversity is actually different. So you could have a neurodiversity or be neurodiverse and have an accommodation, say from SARC, but there are also many others in your classes who may or may not receive those services. So what exactly does neurodiversity mean? Well, as we go into this conversation, I would like for you to think about it as the way that a brain functions that would be, different from the norm. And it doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean there's something wrong. It's just different. And so a person who is neurodiverse will have, learns differently, behaves differently, processes information differently. And some examples of neurodiversity include autism, ADHD, both of which I fall under, as well as OCD, PTSD, a lot of different acronyms. And if you happen to need help with any of those acronyms, just put it in the chat. Someone will be happy to help you with that. So I also want to explain the difference between neurodiversity and mental health conditions, because those are different. And so somebody who has anxiety and depression, which would be considered, mental health and mental illness, usually that means there's something off balance in the brain, and it doesn't necessarily follow under neurodiverse. So those are how the definitions and the lenses of which I want you to understand as we move into these panel discussions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher, for helping us to kind of have a shared understanding of terms. And I want to come back to you really quickly on another pair of terms that commonly get used, and that's neurodiversity and neurodivergent. Could you talk with us about the distinctions between those terms, if any, and what kinds of things we need to know about what those actually mean?
That's a good question. So, Jillian.
Yes, ma'am. Do you want me to?
Can you answer that one? Because
All right.
I honestly don't know.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm not afraid to admit it.
Good for you. All right. So basically neurodiverse, every classroom you walk into is going to be a neurodiverse classroom because everyone's brain functions differently. It basically means you can have a brain that functions typically or normally, and then you've got a brain that has ADHD or autism or something like that. Those are different. So you have a neurodiverse space. Neurodivergent is basically the umbrella term for conditions such as autism, ADHD, on and on. It basically just means that the brain processes, learns, or behaves a bit differently than what is typical or normal.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for providing us with some really valuable foundational information by which we're going to come into the rest of our discussion. So I'd like to throw this question open to the panel, and just for everyone to know, this is going to be an informal kind of free-flowing discussion. This is not going to be your standard kind of really rigid kind of, we're going to, you answer this question and you answer that, but we want to foster a dialogue amongst our panelists and then ultimately with everyone who is a part of this. And I do see that there are some questions and comments that are already coming into the chat, and so we'll try to accommodate those as they come in. But I want to open this question up to the students who are joining us. Kind of thinking in general about your social identities and your lived experiences, experiences with neurodiversity or disability or not, but kind of thinking also intersectionally, how have your social identities and your lived experiences shaped the way that you have interacted here at Georgia Southern?
Nicole, you want to answer that one?
Someone else want to go first while I collect my thoughts?
Yeah. Jill, you said you look like you had something to say.
All right, I can go ahead. I would say for me, it's kind of shaped every experience I've had on Southern's campus, not necessarily in just a bad experience way, but just I've put every foot forward being a disabled and also neurodivergent person because, it's an identity. Working with SDAG, that's also made it like a big contributing part to my education and the space I take at Georgia Southern. But what I would say in the classroom, it has been such a varied experience, and it really depends. A lot of it ends up being up to the professor's free will of if they're going to take your difference well or not. And that's a whole other bucket of worms I could open. But I think I went on a little tangent there, y'all. I'm sorry about that. But leveling back.
Oh, no, that was fine. And your response kind of sets up some questions that are going to be coming down the pike. So I'm really going to be interested for us to continue to explore that. Nicole, Madeline?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's when you have, I can't even think of the words. When you are neurodivergent or you have a disability, that is what you bring into every situation. That's who you are. It's not necessarily something that you can turn off or you can think, this is going to apply more today. This is going to apply more tomorrow. It's just how you walk in life. So coming onto campus, coming into classrooms, it's just learning and figuring out how can the teacher support me and how can I support myself in this environment. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with being on Georgia Southern's campus is just learning what accommodations you need, how to ask for them, and how to work with teachers.
I think that's valuable. Yeah, I'd say like in my 6 years, because I've been a student here for a minute, and I would say being in the community, because the disabled community is something where like we have physical disabilities, but we also include all the, you know, cognitive disabilities, learning disabilities. We like to all be one, you know, so we hang out with each other and we learn from each other a lot, which has been really nice to kind of open my doors more to disabilities that I can't personally relate to, and it gives everybody a louder voice. But specifically at Georgia Southern's campus, I have learned that we do not necessarily pay attention to disability as much as we should. And that has changed in the past couple of years with the development of SDAG and more awareness. But disabilities, mental illness, those are things that are characteristics of someone that you might have in a classroom. And that is a minority group that you as a professor have to do something about. You know, whether it's a racial minority or somebody, you know, is a member of the LGBTQ community, that doesn't require an action from a professor. But if you have a disabled student, that requires an action. And that's one thing that I feel like we don't pay as much attention to, but and I think that that's not a Georgia Southern specific thing, that's a South and honestly American universities thing. But I think that it's really shown light to me in higher education, how inaccessible higher education as a whole is to people with disabilities. So.
Oh, thank you for that. And I want to follow up on a couple of the points that you all raised. So one of the things that you mentioned is that we don't pay enough attention to disabilities and neurodivergence. And it reminds me of, in many of our DIFF workshops, we start with what is termed the social identity wheel, which has an array of different social identities to which a person may ascribe or may be ascribed to them. And so we commonly will think about, you know, at the core, we think about race, we think about gender, we think about age, we think about socioeconomic status. But we don't have as many conversations around ability and neurodiversity. What are some of the reasons why you think we either are not doing it or we are apprehensive about having some of those conversations?
I have a great answer for this one. I'm gonna let Jill speak her piece, but I actually had a blind friend tell me this once, and it's that disability is something that can happen to you. So when that is the only minority group where that is something that you can get in a car accident tomorrow and be disabled the rest of your life, you can have a traumatic brain injury and you can have PTSD, you can have all these things happen to you. And so people want to stay as far away from that as they can because it scares people. Disability is the only minority group that can happen to someone and happens to everyone eventually. We're all going to die at some point. We're all going to be, you know, older adults. Maybe we'll have issues later in life. We'll all get there. And so none of us want to be there now. So we try to stay as far away from it as we can. And I really think that that's why, especially in public, you know, like oh my gosh, don't look at them, you know, like don't give them eye contact. You might catch it, you know? So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like this subconscious thing that no one wants to admit. It's like cheese touch. No one wants to catch it, which is like, no one's going to put it that way, but it's something unconscious in people that it scares people. Disability scares people. And there's this idea of disability pride that a lot of people don't quite understand. It's like, I take every step forward as a proud disabled woman. I'm disabled, I have issues with it that make my life harder, but it's not the label disability that's doing it. It's a society that we're in that's not built for disabled people because we're not talking about these differences and acknowledging them and making, you know, higher education, circling back to here, we're not making higher education doable for all sorts of people. And that starts by acknowledging that all sorts of people deserve an education, you know, that sort of thing. My brain keeps drifting, y'all. I'm so sorry. But turning around, someone give me back.
No, these are great responses, and thank you all for sharing. Any other thoughts about why we don't talk more about neurodiversity and also disability. I think you've shared some great insights that are, you know, really, really poignant here. I want to pivot now to something that you've also alluded to so far, which is the notion of community. One of the things that that was mentioned is the importance of having community and how you're cultivating community here. So I want to ask all of you, how have you created or maintained community here at Georgia Southern, and especially as we've been in the past 2 years of that thing that shall not be named, how have you created and maintained community?
Nicole, do you want
Yeah.
Well, I think I struggled with that for a while when I first came to Southern. There wasn't a group like SDAG that I knew about. I don't think there really even was one at all. I just kind of was going through my days and didn't really have that group. So I wouldn't say that I ever really created one until I found this group this semester and finally got like people to talk to and a community to stand behind.
Yeah, I think a lot of oh, I hear myself echoing, sorry. I think a lot of it has been honestly having COVID-19 happen has honestly been a little bit of a blessing and a curse for the disabled community, because for us specifically, because isolation, I mean, we're already isolated. That was not new. I mean, I stay home. I was staying home before Corona, you know, so it was just one of those things. But we have exponentially grown as a community since COVID has happened. And that has brought to light a lot of issues that have been going on for decades that began to be a problem for able-bodied people in a world of COVID-19, like working from home, learning from home, things like that. And so we've had a lot of positiveness from that. And, you know, when we have wins in the legislature, we all celebrate. So we all have good things to have events for, and we've, you know, developed our club and everything. But I think really having a support system is really what's important. Our mission as SDAG is to be a safe space first and foremost. That was what we created it to be, is a disabled space that's not infiltrated by people without disabilities. And so, you know, we have like a group me message, we have a Discord server and all this stuff, and we talk daily on there. Jill, who's our current secretary, she does daily highs and lows. So we ask everybody in the club, like, what's your high from today? What's your low from today? And we talk about it. We have like little sections for everything you could possibly have a question for. And no matter who you are, if you put in that chat, like, hey, I'm having a hard time today, somebody's going to be on the other side of that line to be there for you. And so that's what's really cool about, I think, our community at Georgia Southern specifically. I love Georgia Southern because it is that like small town feeling where there's not thousands of us here. I mean, there are thousands of us here, but you know, it's not like UGA where
It doesn't feel like thousands is
right.
a great way to put it. Yeah. Like,
so,
I'm from here. I'm bumping into people I went to high school with like every other week. Like, that's insane. And like with the Discord server, like it is so nice to have been able to cultivate this little tiny disabled community. It's like, hey, my chronic illness is flaring. I'm really frustrated. And they're just like, dang, that sucks. And it's just like, even that alone is just very, very comforting and wonderful. And I started doing the highs and lows because it was like, let's keep in touch with each other. You know, let's really be day-to-day part of each other's lives. And that's something that's been wonderful about online communication. And that's something that peaked during COVID. It is really sad that it took a pandemic to make learning and things like this accessible, but it did. So it's a very interesting conversation we've been having over the past year about that.
So I'm the professor in me is always scanning to see who's off mute. And Nicole, I see that you're off mute. I just wanted to come to you and see if there was anything that you wanted to share around like this notion of community.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just like getting out there and just, you know, you never know who's going to be accepting and who's going to be in your corner until you get out there.
Yeah.
find people who have open minds and teach them and keep going.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So at this point, I want to now pivot from, and let me just say, I'm so encouraged and so heartened to hear the ways in which you talk about community, because community in many ways did take a huge hit across so many different boards over the past couple of years. But the ingenuity and the creativity that that we've been able to use in order to redefine community and be in community with each other is so important and so vital. And so thank you for sharing your experiences with that, especially here at Georgia Southern. So I want to now pivot into the classroom space. So many of the people who are here right now joining us and who will be watching this are faculty and staff, and are here because they want to know more about how they can be responsive from the very beginning to within class interactions, responding to and being inclusive of people who are neurodivergent. So to start this, I want to ask a general question. What would you want your professors to know about neurodivergence, so that they can be more accommodating and more open within the classroom? Are there any experiences that you've had that have helped to shape those recommendations or those thoughts that you have?
I think I have one if you guys want me to go first. So my brother is also, my brother has autism, and I grew up with a sibling who, did public school in the early 2000s, before we really knew a whole lot about any of this stuff, so I had a personal firsthand experience of seeing my family kind of struggle through having the public school system understand what it's like to be neurodivergent. And the first thing that I would give advice to, as far as professors, any kind of educator anywhere, is that you need to be able to teach your student the way your student wants to and needs to be taught, instead of the way you think your student should be learning. And that's the number one thing that my mother also tells parents, is that you cannot raise your child the way you want your child to be raised. You need to raise your child the way your child not necessarily wants to be raised, but in the way that is the most beneficial for your child to blossom into the adult that you want them to be. And that goes the same with teachers. And so you are always, always, always going to have a student, I know there's one in every classroom, that does not do their work, does not come to class. You never hear from, they don't ask for help, they are failing. What do you do? And no, it is not your job as an educator to chase them down and make sure that they do their work. But that, as a professor, if someone's not coming to class, not turning in their work, they got zeros for everything, that is an immediate red flag. Okay, there is something going on in that student's life that is preventing them from being successful. What is it? And that could be a parent has died. That could be they've just been diagnosed with a visual impairment and they're going blind, which has happened to me, And so those are all issues that can trigger things that would put you in the neurodivergent category, especially if you have PTSD or you develop a mental illness in college or something like that. Those are all things that can happen. And so you need to be aware as an educator of your classroom, get to know your students, and kind of know which ones have something else going on, have, maybe are registered with SARC, have come up to you, have said something, maybe have said something that's not normal, that maybe is like a, that was odd. Or, and, not like a, that's weird, but I'm thinking of suicidal ideation, something where those are those red flags. As an educator, you should be like, and then ask your student. Communication is key. That is the best way to get in contact with what your student is happening, is talk to them, ask them, they will talk to you. And more often than not, they are silently screaming for someone to listen to them. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Like, communication is the way to go. And the thing is, having SARC accommodations, I always explain it to people. It's like, that is my bridge to enabling that conversation with that professor. It's like, oh, I had this thing from SARC. Let's talk about how you can help me, your student. But not every student that is neurodivergent is going to have that, because there's such disparity in diagnosis, and you need a diagnosis to get help from SARC. So since there's such a disparity there, I would say as professors, make yourself open and make it clear that you are a safe space, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, try to signal that, like, if you come up and tell me that you are having a hard time because of X, Y, and Z, we're going to work through it. We're going to make this be able to happen so you can learn the best way you can. And I feel like that's easier said than done, but that's a whole other conversation that is beyond me. But yes.
Yeah, I would say, like they've kind of been saying, like everyone learns different and everyone is different. So having these conversations, because like what I say and what they say, it could be completely different for other people. It's not just going to be one blanket thing, but having these conversations as a starting point, and then looking back at taking time to see how you can teach these learners, see how you can meet them halfway and really get them to understand what you're teaching in the classroom. Take as much time as you are on the lesson plans for 90% of the kids that you would for the 10% that needs just something a little different so it clicks for them.
These are really, really helpful suggestions. Some of the things that emerge in this conversation around just checking on students and, being open to, to them being able to express their needs, and providing a space that is inviting for them to feel as though they can share, right? That is one of the things that I'm hearing, and the importance of communication, like not letting students kind of languish in silence, but actually being proactive in reaching out and engaging. And Jill, you also mentioned something around the difficulty in navigating diagnosis and being able to get diagnosed in order to be able to access accommodations. And we can come back. I want to come back to that in a little bit. But all three of you have kind of spoken around the importance of setting a space that is open for people to bring themselves in and to be able to share. Is that kind of an accurate kind of conception of if we had to think of a theme coming out of that? Okay. And one of the great things about that is that it doesn't take a whole lot of resources to do that, right? That is something that is available to us as faculty and staff to be able to foster that. We don't have to have a whole lot in order to do that. Dr. Fisher, I want to come to you at this particular point. And since we're talking around issues related to the classroom, and I also invite our students to chime in on this as well. But one of the things that comes up when we have conversations around neurodiversity and neurodivergence is this concept of universal design for learning. Could you talk with us about what universal design for learning is, what maybe some of the main tenets of it are, and also maybe even places where we could get more information about that?
Absolutely, I would be happy to. So universal design for learning is a framework for educating. Typically, we've talked about it with educating students with disabilities, but it fits very well with all students, all marginalized students, and the things that they've been talking about how different everyone is and how everyone learns differently, and trying to get to know them in a way that you can teach that tries to meet all of those different brains and the way people think and learn is through offering choices. And you can offer choices in multiple ways when you design your courses and your quizzes and your major assignments and projects. So there's three main tenets of UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And the first one is engagement. And so giving students options and how they engage with the content that you are providing, whether it be lecture, video, readings, putting together different formats of learning, if you will, to have them engage it. And then the next one, a brief overview, is representation. And so with representation, it's offering ways that you display the information, different visual information, the way that you use language and symbols that promotes that understanding, and then also how you help students comprehend what you're teaching. Some students will do better, as we know, with the background knowledge. Some need that activation, so those type of things. And then the last one is action and expression, and different ways you can offer choices in that area are to provide various ways for students to show you what they know. So some things that I do in my courses is they can provide, I do a lot where they can provide, like in one of my graduate courses, they provide fact sheets, and they can create these fact sheets any way they want. They can use PowerPoint, they can use video, they could record themselves. But actually, I guess in my rubric, I asked for some visuals, so I have to take that back. But I'm just trying to give some examples of some things that you can do. So those are the UDL guidelines in a nutshell, and we will be providing information with the resources after this panel presentation.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And with that, I want to come back to Jill, Madeline, and Nicole. I want to ask you, kind of keeping those UDL kind of principles in mind, but also some of the other things that you've talked about around openness. Can each of you share with us an experience that you've had in a classroom where the professor or the instructor got it right? Right? Something that they may have done that made you feel comfortable, that you belonged, that you were affirmed. Because oftentimes we talk about the things that people do wrong, but I want to think about a time where you had a professor or an instructor who got it right and did something that we could learn to incorporate into our practice.
I don't know. I don't want to go first. Jill, do you have an example?
I'm trying to think. Well, the psychology department has been wonderful. Like, they're very accommodating people, which I would, being the psychology department, I'd like to think, of course, yes, but they've gone out of their way to accommodate me over the past couple of years that I've been a psychology student. They've made it very comfortable and doable for me to come to them and be like, hey, I'm struggling. Can you help me learn the best way I can with my set of circumstances? And they've made it work. They have taken the time, and I hate to say it, but I have had many professors in other departments not take the time. I would ask, hey, can you please do this for me? It was, I don't have to, which that's a whole other discussion, because technically you do have to. But
You're not wrong. But yeah, I think one of I would say I've had a couple of professors that have been really that was really cool. But I remember in one specific class I had I don't know what department they work in, but I had one professor who, this is kind of different because I have a service dog, so I bring a service dog class, but just with SARC and accommodations and communication and everything, I had brought my service dog to class, first day class, new semester, and this was before I had turned in my accommodation letters. And as a later student, like in graduate school, I don't even think I handed out any, because at that point all my professors kind of knew who I was. So it's like there's no questioning Madeline service dog. Yeah, okay.
They know the deal. They know Mercury.
Yeah, but this was a professor I'd never had before, didn't know me, you know, nothing like that, and brought my dog in. Everything was fine in class, you know, but dog in classroom, and I leave, right? And that night, that professor emailed me, and they said, "Hey, just wanted to ask about your dog. Noticed there was a Labrador in class. Just curious, you know, is that your service dog? Like, what's going on there?" And I told them, I was like, "Hey, yeah, like I'm visually impaired. That's my service dog. Sorry, I didn't give you a heads up at all. My bad." And I was like, "I can give you his paperwork or a accommodation letter the next time I see you in class." And they emailed me back and they were like, "That's not necessary. Just curious. Cute dog." And I was like, "All right, cool. Like, no questions asked. I don't have to cite the ADA to them." That was very refreshing. And it was just one of those things where it's like, if you ask questions, 99% of the time you're going to get a logical answer. You know, if you see a student using a device, or you have on your syllabus explicitly that they are not supposed to have computers in class, and you see a student without a computer on the first day of class, it is probably for a reason. So, you know, it's just one of those things, but always ask questions and you'll probably get a good answer. But that professor was really good at
Like, oh, plot twist. We're just curious about the little guy.
that.
Nothing bad this time. That is nice. Yeah.
I think one situation that stands out to me is just like a teacher who just really cared to pay attention in class. So we had already talked about my accommodations and everything like that. And then, you know, I'm having a bad day in class and like I have sunglasses on, I just can't today. And then after class, she comes up to me and she's like, "Are you okay? Like, do you want to talk? Is there anything I can do to help you?" Just seeing that even in a large classroom and having that conversation was something that I really appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually piggybacking off that, a very similar story. I had an English professor my sophomore year, and I think Cameron Clements in our English department. Shout out, because she's one of the best English professors I've ever had in my life. But I was an athlete my freshman year, and I had a roommate who also had that same professor. We were in like the same English 2 class, but just different times on the same day. And I was in there in the morning, and I guess I was not having a good day that day. I was not really aware that I had looked different or that my demeanor was different, but I was just off, apparently. And the next class, my Professor Clemens asked my roommate, "Hey, is Madeline okay? Like, what's going on? Is she good?" And my roommate texted me. She's like, "Hey, are you good? Like, Professor Clemens just asked if you were okay." And I was like, "Yes, I think so." But it was just knowing that my professor noticed in class, didn't come up to me in class, texted someone she knew she would see, who would be seeing me that day, just to make sure that I was okay and I was doing all right. And like that, just, I was fine. Like nothing was going on, obviously, but that was really, really comforting, knowing that not only do I have a professor that I really enjoy and that is teaching me really good English, but I have a professor at my university that I could probably go to if I had an emergency, or if I really needed a trusted adult, that's who I would call, you know? So, because none of us have parents here. So our professors are kind of like our moms and dads away from home. So it's comforting to have those.
Thank you all for sharing that. A couple of things that emerge from your responses. Number one, ask questions. And that includes asking questions from a true point of caring and concern, and also pay attention, right? Being attentive to what's happening within the classroom and being able to respond when things may seem as though there may be something that's going a little bit off. So again, these are things that don't require a whole other degree for us to learn in order to do these things in the classroom, but these are helpful, practical tools for us to think about. In a moment, I'm going to pivot to a conversation around leadership, as all of you are serving as leaders and advocates and operating in the advocacy space. But I want to ask one more question around the classroom. And I really do appreciate you all offering the things that professors have gotten right. But in hindsight, kind of looking back over the academic experiences that you've had, what do you wish your past teachers faculty, and or leaders knew in order to better support you as a student? What kinds of things do you wish they knew that would have enabled you to have a better experience?
I'm trying to pinpoint where to start, and that makes it sound really bad, and I'm sorry.
I have kind of a good general one to start you off with.
Yeah, go ahead.
My first one would be that the most valid opinions about the neurodiverse and disabled community come from the students that belong to said community. So if you hear information, hear something, say something, whatever, and it's not coming from the community, okay. You know,
Absolutely.
so it's just one of those things where the disabled community is an expert on itself. And I run into almost a daily situation where I am told something about myself by someone who's not me. And it's like, I didn't know that you were blind too. Tell me more about that. You know, so it's just one of those things that I've had some professors in the past that assume things about me instead of asking me. You know, like I've been told that I'm not allowed to have my ESA in class before, which is valid, but my dog's a guide dog. So it's just one of those things where asking questions is the best. You know, we all know what happens when you assume, so it's just better to ask questions.
I have had a similar experiences where it was just, I've had a professor basically speak out of turn about my own being neurodivergent. I was told my ADHD was not sufficient enough reason to be struggling in her class. It's like, I'm sorry, are you my psychiatrist? No, you're not. Even it's the whole idea of just say, like, there's the big organization Disabled in Action, and their catchphrase is nothing about us without us. And that is a big one. Please do not assume. That is definitely something. And it's also like, you are bound to give me some reasonable accommodations. The ADA is a thing. I feel like that does come up a lot with some professors, that yes, you do have to accommodate me. Legally, you do. So that's an interesting one.
That goes back to there's no education about the ADA. We don't talk about
Yes.
the ADA. No one, there's no handbook like, hey, when you come across a disabled person, this is what they have, you know, can't infringe on their rights. So it's like, it can be very confusing. There's no across the board training. I mean, we have one student organization that advocates for the disabled population. And so it's just one of those things where you don't know about disabled people or disabilities unless you are one or have one. And so it can be very frustrating when, and I think this comes up a lot when we talk about privilege with any sort of demographic, whether it's race or gender or whatever, when you have the oppressed screaming at the oppressor, it doesn't always go, you know, when you're screaming, hey, this isn't fair, I want my rights, you know, that's a fight as old as time, right? And so what I always try to advocate for is that we need allyship. Every minority group needs allies, right? And so the best way to you know, learn and advocate and support the disabled community is to sometimes be quiet, sit down and listen and let somebody else talk.
Yeah, it's like hold the microphone in front of my face
and I think
amplify our voice, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that can be really hard with a student-professor relationship sometimes, where, you know, I know that we all say that teachers are constantly taught by their students, but it does come to a point where sometimes a student truly does know better than their professor when it comes to their own learning style and their disability. And I think that gets lost in translation sometimes. And it's really frustrating from a student's perspective when we feel like we're not being understood and there's no one there, like we don't have a professor that's like, you know, that can relate to that immediately, or maybe our professor is totally able-bodied and has never been around someone with a disability and doesn't know how to interact. I mean, we are a university on the Bible Belt, so, you know, it's not like everybody down here has totally experienced and seen someone with these things going on. So it can definitely be a learning curve, I think.
Can I actually ask you a question from a totally different perspective? I have a 7-year-old son who is very smart, very sweet, but we are in the process of diagnosing him maybe with ADHD. I already see signs of it, and his teacher also see things like that. So when we are having this conversation, I'm imagining my own son 10 years later, when he gets into college, what kind of situation he's going to face. As a parent, maybe also from my own cultural background, I grew up in China and it's a different cultural environment. When his teacher talked to me, we had a conversation about his problem and what kind of medical diagnosis we are pursuing. And his teacher told me if he got diagnosed, that he's going to receive all sorts of commendation. He can get longer time to take tests. He can work outside the classroom for a while, during the class time period, since the routine accommodation. And when I heard about that, I actually has doubt about it. I hope to receive accommodation from the teacher. I hope the teacher can put extra work on him, but not give him special treatment. Instead, I want the teacher to make extra effort to make him fit in and can have a normal life. So he does not need extra time. He does not need to work outside the classroom for a while, needs to be treated differently. So when he grew up, maybe beyond the college, I'm thinking about beyond college, because college professor like me offer accommodation all the time. But when he joined the workforce, he may not be able to get accommodation all the way. And he also maybe wants to be normal, just like other kids. He needs to learn. And I'm going to help him with that. His teacher, I hope, can help him with that. Instead of giving him special treatment, I want the teacher to make extra efforts to help him to be the same as other kids. Am I wrong with that?
I think, no, I don't think that you're wrong for feeling that way as a mother at all. I think that we all want our children to grow up to be successful adults as much as we can. Mm-hmm. I think that with ADHD and learning disabilities, that is something through public school that you will, of course, get accommodations for. In public school, that is something that's provided to you by law, and that translates into adulthood and into employment. So the ADA covers all public school and employment. So as an adult, he will still have accommodations covered by the ADA as a disabled individual.
Yes, that is a right protected to him.
That is a right that
as long as he is just a functioning human, he has a right to workplace and educational accommodations.
And I think what the most important thing with accommodations, and the ADA highlights this, is that accommodations are designed to be reasonable accommodations. And what reasonable accommodations mean is that someone with a disability is not getting an advantage over someone who is able-bodied, but they are being brought up to the same playing field. So when your son gets extra time for a test, for example, that is because without that time, it would take him significantly more time than everybody else to finish a test. So in order to get him on that equal playing field of being able to test as accurately, to be able to get those high scores, he'll need some extra time to be able to test normally as he would if he didn't have ADHD. With that extra time, that's a reasonable accommodation where he is being put on the same playing field as his classmates, where he has an accommodation, but it's just to make his ADHD more manageable for him as a student in the classroom. And so that's where you'll see the dispersion. So when you don't have those accommodations in school, if you didn't have the extra time and the testing and the studying outside the classroom, you would see his test scores be significantly lower than what he's actually capable of, because he's not getting that extra, time that he may need just because his brain is different. Not that it's any less capable or bad. It's just he learns different. And there will be plenty of other kids in his classrooms that have ADHD and ADD and are doing the exact same thing he is. So.
Yeah, and if I can speak real quick, I have ADHD myself, so I have accommodations in place to help me in the classroom. And it kind of goes into the idea of equity. It's like my classmate next to me without ADHD, they can take that test in an hour and be okay. I need to go somewhere else and be in my own private space, or I'm going to fail that same test. And to actually put it in an example that I had happen, most exams that I used to take, not in a quiet space at SARC, I was getting C's on. But once I started taking those tests in the SARC private space, I was getting A's. So I was capable of getting A's on those tests. It's just my brain needed different accommodations so I could get the grade that I was capable of. So I could be on that same level of playing field as my classmate next to me, basically.
Thank you for your input.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind is that all these suggestions that your teacher is saying for accommodations, like he may not need them all. It's going to be a learning curve of what helps him succeed and what can get him to his highest potential and capable of testing and learning as best as he can.
Mm-hmm. And
Absolutely.
He might need something one year and might not need it the next year, and might figure out what works for him and what doesn't. So just like any other student, study habits and things like that, you have to find out what works for you and what doesn't. So
yes, and that'll be a continuing conversation you and him and educators will be having, basically figuring out what is going to help him in the classroom so he can do the best he can. And I had another thing I was going to say, it fell out of my brain, y'all. It really did. Okay, yes, I always explain the accommodations that I have from SARC as an insurance policy. Do I use every single one of those accommodations all the time? No, but if I need them, they're there to help me. So basically it's like, you would rather have too much than too little is the way I always view it.
Thank you all for those robust responses, and thank you, Juan, for asking the question. And I think it really helped to open up the space. And I do have one additional question, just kind of as a foundational thing before we go to the next section. Also, a reminder, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will be reviewing that and answering those soon. But I want to pose a question to the students and Dr. Fisher. When we talk about ADD versus ADHD, some people may not be familiar with the distinctions between the two. Could y'all share some additional information about what the distinction is between those two? Jill, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have ADHD myself, and I wasn't diagnosed until, goodness, I was 19. But so I ended up doing a lot of research into it, so I can definitely help with that. So basically, there used to be a distinction between the idea of attention deficit disorder, ADD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. But Madeline, you might have to correct me. I believe it was with the publication of the DSM-5. They were kind of collapsed into just being ADHD because we understand more about how ADHD actually behaves across genders and how it actually manifests internally. So we basically see that Madeline pulling out her DSM, she's good with that. But basically they end up being collapsed because we have a better understanding that hyperactivity, even if it's not a little boy jumping around the classroom, hyperactivity can be internal, like racing thoughts. And that is what I always had. So it's like, I had that hyperactivity, but it wasn't outward and seeing. So basically, once we understood that more, it is now just ADHD.
Mm-hmm. You are correct. They are both together.
It was DSM-5?
DSM-5,
Cool.
yes. And, like Jill said, there are minute differences, not enough to where as an educator would need to know the differences between ADHD and ADD and all those specific things to help a student. But I grew up with a brother with OCD and ADHD, so I think what helped him in schooling the most was just teachers that knew what was going on. The impulses, the lack of attention span, I have to get up and move, I have to stand in the back of the classroom, I have to do something with my hands while I listen. Those students that you have in those classrooms, especially when they are college age, they know what they need. Kids with ADHD in college, 9 times out of 10, know what helps them best in the classroom to pay attention. So you as an educator need to be, hey, yes, if you need to stand in the back of the classroom, you're more than welcome to do that. If you want to come and sit on the floor and do that, you are more than welcome to. I've had professors in the past, let kids stand, let kids do whatever. And as long as you're not being disruptive to your peer, then you're fine. And that's, goes back to reasonable accommodations. You don't want to disrupt what's going on around you, but you do want to be able to focus the way that you need to. And so that's where, I know we all remember the fidget spinners. So that's literally what that's for. It's for kids to be able to sit in his chair and do that. And it's less distracting than like bumping your leg or, doing whatever. And so, it's ADHD, especially with college students, is definitely, I think students are more prepared to mitigate that by themselves at that age than they would be.
Even in my case of being late diagnosed, I kind of had to figure out what I was going to do. And these kids, they've been managing and learning in the classroom, and they've made it to college and they're doing well in college. So they know what they need. It's just, it comes back to the idea of like, let's communicate.
Thank you for offering that breakdown for us. I think that's really instructive for all of us. Again, I just want to encourage everyone to post questions if you have them. We're going to be going into the Q&A soon, but I want us to move into a discussion around leadership, because all of you are serving in a capacity of leadership around disability, neurodiversity, neurodivergence. And so my question is, what have been some highlights in the leadership and the advocacy that you're doing in terms of being able to provide support to others, and how has that helped or affirmed you in return?
I think my biggest highlight of being the woman in charge this year has been really just having a community come together. We did not have anything like that before on our college campus, with disabled kids being able to find each other. And that has been the biggest gift that I think I've given myself as a student, and given my peers, and given our university as a whole, because I mean, that's a student organization that will live on forever, and we actually started that group from a not so amazing situation that happened that was just not a good, it was lots of ableism going on. And so we were just, like, hey, we're just going to start a group that is for us, by us, and that's it. And it grew into something where, we now have worked with SARC, we've worked with other departments, to do things like this and to make campus more accessible physically and bring more awareness to our community as a whole. So I think it's been a lot of fun watching it blossom.
Yeah, it's been a very great first year, and I'm very grateful for it. I didn't become disabled until around the time I graduated high school. So it was kind of like, oh, I'm thrown in the deep end. Let's try to figure this out. And it was kind of like I was always looking for someone to ask these questions. And I started to realize, being in a leadership position, I was like, oh, wait, I'm the person that's answering the questions now. It's like this very validating, like beautiful thing to see. It's like, there's people to go ask the questions to now. And I'm glad I can be that person, because, I remember not having that person. It's just been, you get a lot of imposter syndrome with it. It's like, wait, what do you mean you're asking me this big, important question? But it's also like, you know what? I'll figure it out. Let's figure it out. And that's been really great.
Yeah, I haven't had much of a leadership position in this org yet, but just with examples like tabling at the union, getting to interact with people and getting to educate them with what little I know and what little I've been taught over this time, just starting that conversation, I think, is the biggest thing and the most proud thing, just getting more people aware of this topic and communicating about it.
And I think it's been really cool to see, like, when we do table on canvas, Nicole, that made me think of this. Like, we'll be sitting there tabling, right? And we'll have all of our disability stuff on display. And somebody will walk by and do a double take, like, oh, a disability group.
They're like, oh,
And it's
hello.
always a kid with like ADHD, a kid with dyslexia. It's like, oh, I didn't even know you guys existed. It's like, yes, welcome.
We're like, hello,
Stop
let's
by.
join. It's
But
so fun.
every time we're out there, every time there are multiple people who like literally do a double take and are
I
like,
love it.
wait. So it's really cool to see like you're my people, like light bulb go off in people's minds. So
It's so fun. I love it.
yeah.
Tabling's definitely a highlight. Even, yes, I love it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Like that building community through visibility, presence, and then also the legacy that you spoke of. That this is something that will live on, and it will be an asset to so many others who are going to be a part of the Georgia Southern community. That's wonderful. And I want to come to Dr. Fisher on this. You just posted something in the chat about they do so much that I can't keep up with them. What has your experience been like in working with this group, with SDAG, as well as kind of doing this kind of work at the university level within the larger community?
So I didn't become their advisor until January. Their past advisor had left the university, but I actually reached out to that past advisor and I said, if they need another, I don't know. I honestly don't remember how I found out about you guys. But anyway,
Who knows? Magic.
yeah.
I think we just
But I knew
pop up and it's
you
like,
exist. Yeah, I knew you existed, and I loved what you were doing. And so when I heard she was leaving, I contacted her and I said, if they need another one, I'd be willing to do it. And I'm so thankful. You heard them say they communicate mostly on Discord, and I'm not on Discord, so I have trouble keeping up with that. And I rarely check that group me. So but I do receive the requests, of course, that come in to reserve the spaces, and I know what they're doing. And today you had a sit-in, right, to recognize at 5:04. Did you do that in the rotunda? Was that today?
we weren't able to make that one happen. Unfortunately, we actually
It's the
bit
last
off of
few
it.
classes got us. We didn't really think
Yes.
about that.
Oh my gosh. But
Wow.
next year, April 5th, which would be the anniversary of when this sit-in started, we are prioritizing that for sure. But yeah, sometimes I go to request those events on Adhd. I'm like, I'm so sorry, Dr. Fisher. Here's a bunch of emails right now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, we've done a lot of tabling. We had a week of access. We had a fundraising
That
week
was great.
semester. We in total raised probably about $2,000 this year in just funding for things. We were able to give donations to 3 nonprofits that serve the disabled community. We were able to give money to a woman in town who's home and bedbound who really needed a new cell phone. So we were able to do that for her. And it's been a really good show. I mean, we do run a pretty tight ship over here. So yeah.
And I have witnessed y'all in action, and yes, you all do an amazing job. And thank you for everything that you do to raise awareness and to create community here. It is truly, truly phenomenal and much needed. I want to ask one final question and then open it up to the audience. As you think back over your experiences and the work that you're doing right now, and even in the space that we're sharing as we're coming to learn from you, what call to action would you make to faculty and institutional leaders here at Georgia Southern around neurodivergence and disability?
I have 2. You want me to go first, real quick? 1, hire more disabled and neurodiverse people to your universities. 2, when you have a department like SARC, the people who work there should also be disabled, and they should have a group that is governed by the university for students who have disabilities. It's the whole creation of community. So for us specifically, because we have SARC, we have us, all prioritizing else that doesn't have what we got going on, add it, because it's a really great project to have. So
We missed a little bit of what you said in that last part, Madeline. Your screen froze.
oh, sorry. Last little bit was just if like other universities that don't have what we have, like a good SARC and a good student organization, create it, get students involved, get like your 10 disabled students are on campus and say, hey, start a group chat and like make a club. Because
That's literally how this club started.
It is
A group
seriously
chat
changing on college campuses. It's amazing. It has been amazing to see the difference, just like how SARC functions. Now there's a button on SARC's website where you can report inaccessible barriers on campus. We did that.
Yeah.
Yay. So it really makes a huge difference. So just hiring and then making space accessible for your students would be my top.
Yeah, well, I would say like going off of getting people in those roles is just listen to people. If we're trying to tell you something, or even if you don't know, just listen to us, because we're the voices that are behind it.
Yes, like you can hire people all day, and absolutely I encourage it, but you got to also listen to what they have to say, but you got 2 points and you got to hit them. And I said this earlier, but it's this whole idea of nothing about us without us, like we're here, we are here. We are such a large chunk of the population. We are here and we have a lot to say.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And just, statistics, social science brain here, 15% of our population is disabled. 7% of disabled students have learning disabilities. So learning disabilities is your most, like among the disabled, the most prevalent disability in schools is learning disability. So more often than not, you're going to have that ADHD, that ADD, that OCD, that dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, all the learning disabilities that you could possibly have under the sun is going to be something that you're exposed to in higher education. And what is beautiful with now in the world in 2022 is that higher education is the most accessible it has ever been now to the disabled community since the history of time. So we are just going to see more disabled kids come into college. And if we do not prepare to have that influx, we do not make sure that our campuses are accessible, down to things like sidewalks and how the cobblestone in our pedestrian may look nice, but it's really hard in a wheelchair. We are going to stop having kids come to college here because it's not accessible. And that's not something that I would like to see from my university I graduated twice from. So, I truly believe that Georgia Southern has the ability and the chance to be a leader and an example in how to treat disabled and neurodivergent students in the classroom. And I think I fully believe in all of us, but I think it's really just we need to listen and learn. And, none of us are always correct all the time. And that's something I definitely had to learn as a teenager. But, is that always listening to what others have to say is always valuable. And the more you can expose yourself to people who don't look, think, or act like you, the better off you will be in life.
Wonderful. Thank all of you for offering your insights, your experience, and this has truly been enlightening and will continue to be, because now we want to open it up for Q&A. So again, thank all of you for joining us. This is an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you may have. So feel free to either raise your hand or you can unmute, or if you would feel more comfortable typing your question into the chat, you can do that as well. But we are ready to accommodate all of your additional questions that you may have for our dynamic panelists. Yes, Peggy.
I was so excited about this panel. and it's just like living up to my excitement. So I really appreciate you all sharing your experiences, your advice, your call to action. I have 2 questions. I'll ask one now. They're both kind of in a different realm. But the first one is, what books or graphic novels are you reading or have you read that center characters with disabilities? I would love to add some things to my reading list. So please, what are you reading? What have you read? What should we all be reading?
Ooh, I'm gonna let Jill answer that one. She's the reader.
I'm really not, though. I'm trying to think.
More so than I am. Okay, well,
I love reading. It's just hard.
yeah. Okay, so blind, not a huge reader anymore. So I watch a lot of videos and TV. Personally, my favorite, Daredevil, Marvel, blind, best superhero ever.
Oh
Graphic
my
novel.
gosh.
My
And coworkers called me Daredevil the other day and I wanted to cry. It was so nice. I was
yeah,
like, yes.
so yeah, our also Marvel Universe, Hawkeye, who's real name I cannot remember right now.
Echo.
He's hearing impaired.
Dr.
Yeah,
Smallwood
Hawkeye's
got
hearing
those
impaired,
names.
and then there's another hearing impaired character, Echo, in there. Yes.
Nice. Okay.
Books, though, now that I think about it, I actually mentioned this off the top of my head to SDAG. I mentioned this. James Patterson wrote a young adult
Yes.
series called Maximum Ride. And that is a story about 6 kids that get kidnapped at childbirth and are turned into half human, half birds with like angel wings. And one of the kids is blind because of a because of an experiment gone bad. He ended up blind.
There's a lot going on in that book
Yeah,
series, but it's wonderful.
It's a lot.
It's
a
comforting.
lot. It's by James Patterson. It's called Maximum Ride. And that was the first book I ever read as a child that had a blind character in it that I could like actually relate to. So that was pretty cool. So
I bought a book for my little cousin not long ago, and it was talking about like differences. It was Just Ask. I think that's what it was called. It was written by a Supreme Court justice because she grew up with type 1 diabetes. It was such a cute little kid's book just talking about just ask. You know, we've all got differences. Just ask, which that shows to some points we were talking about here. This isn't a fiction book, but there's like a collection of essays, disability visibility, and the editor was Alice Wong. It has like a bunch of short essays written by disability advocates. That was an excellent read. Just a lot of point of views from a lot of differently, like a ton of different disabilities, ton of different experiences. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other like just.
Bree got me a book for Christmas. That's our vice president. I'm trying to remember. She got all of us disability books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, but this was like, they were all excellent books, and I'm having such a hard time remembering names, y'all. This is Neurodivergency live. I can't remember things.
Yeah. I have to explain to people like someone, I can't remember who was asking me like, is Jill always that all over the place? And I'm like, you have no idea. Like meetings run how his brain functions.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm everywhere. Oh my gosh. That makes a lot of sense.
It's okay. We just go with Jill's brain decides the flow.
You know what? Y'all go with it. Y'all are able to adapt. We work it out.
These are great suggestions. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, we have a comment in the chat. This has been a terrific panel. I wonder if it would be helpful to invite SDAG and or SARC to do a quick presentation in my large survey courses at the beginning of the semester. Would y'all be open to that? I usually just tell my students on the first day that both my daughter and partner have ADD, so I am all about accommodations and I will meet you where you are. But as a relatively neurotypical person, I wonder if it would be more compelling coming from someone for whom this is a lived experience.
I am not the upcoming president, so that's not my choice, but Jill, I'm
I
sure
am. You Michelle, you can shoot me an email. I'm definitely open to that. I'll put my email in the chat. I think that's a great idea. You know, like that's definitely like putting your money where your mouth is. Of like, hey, I'm accommodating and it matters. It's SDAG, Madeline, SDAG,
I was
GSU.
like, oh, I'm going to beat her to it. But it's like, oh no, blind girl, typo, no, fail.
I think it would also be like a good opportunity for the students to meet our organization and like get help beyond the classroom, because I think that can be really beneficial to in the classroom as well, just having a community behind them.
Mm-hmm. And actually, that brings up a point that I was going to bring up, just reminded me, is that before SDAG started, I actually went to SARC and I was like, hey, is there any other blind kids you can like tell me go here so I can like have a friend? And they literally told me, no, we cannot tell you who else is blind here because HIPAA, what's law, so okay. So that would be amazing if we could have like an email list to send out like a newsletter every semester where it's like, hey, professor, give this to your classroom. And it's like, hey, if you have a disability and you want friends, there's this group, you know? So that would be really cool because SARC can't tell disabled students, like they can't tell us like, oh, hey, by the way, there's like kids that are new, you know? So
yeah, like
yeah,
legal obligation and all, which like.
So we either have to seek them out on our own or they have to come find us. So
Miss Pageant just asked if we have representation on the Armstrong campus. Not currently.
We do not have students to do that on the Armstrong campus. We would
So
be
far that hasn't
open
happened.
to it, but we
Yes.
have not had the numbers to form a chapter over there.
Yeah,
But
I think we have like a couple people from the Armstrong campus in the Discord currently, but that's about the extent. But definitely open to it always.
yeah, we do have members that are on the Armstrong campus, absolutely. But
Yeah.
no one with a board. But in a perfect world, we would love to have like a chapter with a whole e-board on Statesboro's, Liberty, and Armstrong's campus, which would be really cool.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So first of all, so thankful for a wonderful presentation. This is like amazing and very honest panel presentation. And so I thank you all and Dr. Fisher as well. Just a quick, I won't say suggestion, but if you have it, I have not come across it. If this becomes an idea to represent by the SDAG to go and talk about neurodiversity and stuff like that at the start of the semester, you can have like a trailer, you know, you can have like a short advertisement, like, hey, look at us or talk to us, or like, you know how before the movie preview, so every faculty member, whoever wants to showcase their syllabus in a different way, there is like, I want you to check this out, I want you to look at this. And even one sentence by one of you and the faculty coming in who are supporters of you can like 2 to 3 minutes timing in the first lecture is not a big deal, because all we do is working on the syllabus or putting this, as Peggy just mentioned, in FIE instructors or SOAR presentation. It's going to become hit and people are going to join because of the passion what you guys are bringing to this, and so willingly you are participating into this. And none of it is like revised or memorized, it's just heartfelt, you know. So just same way, just make one Zoom video, share it with everybody on a university listserv and say like, we want to be heard.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah,
I don't know why we haven't thought of this. That's genius. Yes. I love it.
And project in such a way, it's like more to come soon, like as a trailer.
Yeah, we could probably work something over the summer, Jill.
Honestly, yeah. Like we're all here over the summer. Let's
major
do some
project
work.
Yes.
If you need somebody from faculty side, we will definitely help you. We support you. We will definitely help you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that idea.
Love that. Thank you.
I have one question for all of you. In high school and in elementary school, if you are a neurodivergent, or if you have any condition or disability, there is an IEP, right? As you grow older, as you cross 18, is that IEP still considered valid?
So how
That's a
it
Madeline question.
No.
Yeah.
So, okay. So in public school, if you have an IEP, you're a student with a disability and you are over the age of 18 and you're still in your high school as a high school student, yes, you still have an IEP. We serve students with disabilities, I think up to the age of 21 in public school. Once you come to higher education, we don't have IEPs. You become a registered SARC student and you have accommodations, and that is what you have. So there's
So
no
so Madeline, help me. Who helps you as an adult about your accommodations?
in college, when you become a new student, you are a freshman, you'll have an intake meeting with SARC. So when you go to SARC, you say, hey, I am a student with a disability. I'll need accommodations. They'll say, okay, we're going to schedule a meeting with you.
So you will represent yourself.
Right. Yes. Yes. And that's
okay.
Right. And that's why my first thing when I cite, higher education is not accessible is because not every student with a disability over the age of 18 who wants to attend college can do so 100% by themselves. And once you turn 18, your legal parent and guardian is no longer after you're 18, So,
and if at all, sorry to cut you, if at all a parent want to be in the meeting, is it allowed?
in my experience, I don't think so. Like if I had a meeting with SARC and I said, hey, can my mother come and sit on the meeting? I don't think they allow that.
How messed up system.
Not that I know of. And
yeah, because
yeah, and that goes, like, oh, if you're a student in college, you should be able to do it by yourself,
It's not as simple as that.
It's not always black and white like that, yeah.
It's like whenever I did my intake meeting, like my first time in college, I didn't have an IEP growing up because like I wasn't officially diagnosed with anything. I was just kind of like, let's figure it out. But whenever I did my intake meeting with SARC, I had no idea what I needed. I didn't even know what was available to me. I was just kind of like, what do the other ADHD kids get? And I didn't get a real answer.
And that's
it was kind of like, what do you need? I don't know.
About getting diagnosed in college, like when you have an IEP in high school, it's much easier to become a college student knowing that you've had one in the past because you know.
Yeah, and you have an idea of what you need.
But if you
on an official scale
diagnosed with ADHD or ADD in college or autism, there are a lot of adults, especially when we look at disparity with racial differences. Like the Native American population and Latinx population, they have the hardest time getting diagnosed with things like autism, and so a lot of them are teenagers or maybe young adults when they get diagnosed for the first time. And that would be when you're in college. So it can be really difficult trying to navigate all of that as an adult.
Yeah. It was very much like, oh, all of a sudden, I didn't know I had to come into this with my advocate face on, which like, I didn't know that going into it.
Yeah, you don't expect to have to jump through hoops, but that's kind of what
and even when I started to lose vision and I became legally blind like earlier this semester, I went there and I was like, what do the other blind kids get? And he was like, what do you need? I'm like, dude, I don't know. I literally just became blind like 2 seconds ago. I need you to help me.
That was like
so Jillian, just to back off, because I heard John question as well. So I'm asking you, if anybody else has question, please jump in. I can get in touch with these people anytime. But Jillian, so then with the high school till grade 12, there is this huge support system of a speech therapist and this therapist and that therapist and I don't know, special aid instructor, and then the moment you turn 18, everything is gone. 21, everything is gone. Like you have to support yourself. So is there any other support staff available during that meeting or any paper accommodating you?
Dr. Fisher just put in the chat, some people are able to get help through vocational rehabilitation, which is, a state program. But the thing is, it can be difficult for a lot of people to get access to. Like I'm going through the process of trying to get access to it right now.
And it's not everybody. I mean, you have to have certain disabilities to be able to have that.
You have to be able to check certain boxes. So I know Eagle Academy, which our former advisor, Dr. Pickens, used to run. I know a lot of the work they did was helping intellectually disabled students, go from IEP to college. And, they had their own like unofficial IEP. And that's an excellent source for those that fit under that box.
But
it's not across the board like it is in
And there's no one when you become a student in college, there's no one with here are all your resources. Reach out to these people, like I'm a visually impaired student, so I had access to vocational rehabilitation very early. But I actually was eligible for a full ride scholarship all 4 years of undergrad. Nobody told me, and I only had access for it for my last 2 years. And that was like $30,000 that my parents just threw away for no reason.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
it was
like
a scholarship, and just nobody told me. And
it's like I'm trying to get the same thing right now because I'm blind now, and Madeline's like, you best go get that. And I'm like, you bet I will.
yeah. And I found out from another blind college student at UGA. We had both like been at the same
Georgia Council for the Blind thing. You said
we had just attended an event together, and he's like, "Oh, are you on VR?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, what is that?"
It's like these things are not broadly advertised, and that's a huge issue. It's like you have to go like through the tiniest little crevices, like, please show me these wonderful opportunities.
That's across the board. That's with disability, that's with mental health, that's with substance abuse treatment, that's with anything, it's just, we have that stuff here. It's just not advertised. And the biggest kicker that I always tell people is like, yes, we have this, we have the counseling center, we have all these things, but 9 times out of 10, that student is not going to be asking for help, because your students that need the most help are going to be hiding it very well, are not going to be the students that you assume are having a hard time like that. And college students, I mean, like when we're having a tough time, we hide it very well. We shut down. That's a generational thing. But it's a very much, you kind of have to push the bird to go get help. Help me, help yourself,
And like when it comes to like showing things that are available for disabled students, that's something SDAG has been trying to do. Like we have a folder on Google Drive of resources. I'm like, hey, here's a scholarship for this. If you have this disability, please go apply for it. Get your money. Like, because they are out there. Oh, I'm sorry. I got distracted. Peggy put something in the chat.
And we just shared a couple of things, the evaluation for this session, because we are at time, as well as the flyer that was created specifically for us to be able to share here with some amazing resources. And also, Dr. Fisher mentioned Thrive at University of North Florida. So the PDF that was just added to the chat has some great links and resources. So please make sure to check that out and use that as a guide and a resource, and share widely within your networks, within your colleges, your central units, because the more that we get this information out, the more opportunities we can offer to make sure that everyone has access to the things that will enable them to live optimal lives and really thrive. So at this point, please, let's all give our esteemed panelists all the praise, all of the thanks, all the emojis, because this has been phenomenal. This has been so instructional. It's been so rich, and it's just been such a great opportunity to share space with all of you. So thank you for your time, your effort, sharing your experiences. We really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, and if you want to follow us, our group, on our socials, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we do it all.
That is linked in the form.
Yep.
It has our Linktree with all of our things. It also has resources, even more. So always sharing them.
Our Linktree is actually kind of stocked with a lot of stuff. There's all the resources for students that if you have a student that needs SARC, there's all the resources there. There are some resources connecting you to larger organizations in Georgia and throughout the entire country on disabilities. There is another link that will link you to ways to help Ukrainians with disabilities right now, which is always important. And we have other things like all of our socials, how to join our meetings, and how to donate, which is always important. So.
Awesome. Yes. Well, words cannot express how grateful we are to all of you for being a part of this experience. We've learned so much from you, and wish you continued success and support in all the things you're doing. Thank you, Dr. Fisher, for posting the Linktree in the chat. So on behalf of all the members of the Diversity and Inclusion Faculty Fellows, thank you all for being a part of this critical conversation. Just to let you know, we do have one more offering this semester on Friday, May the 13th. We are going to be offering a workshop. Oh, we're not doing it? Oh.
It's May 6th.
Friday, May 6th.
Oh, it's May 6th. May 6th, my bad. I'm pushing it back. Sorry. On May 6th.
These are hard.
The morning of May 6th, we are going to be doing another learning opportunity on building an inclusive syllabus. So please join us. If you have any particular syllabi elements that you want to share and kind of talk through, you can bring those as well. It will be virtual, and we do have, when we send out information from this discussion, we can also share information about that workshop. So please join us for our final offering of this semester. But this has been, again, it's been wonderful sharing space with you. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. And
Thank you
panelists,
so much
yes,
for the
please hang
opportunity.
on for a second. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Yes,
Thank you so much. This was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Alex, I will.
Thank you. It's good seeing you.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.